Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. This is our version of Take 5 with Steven Travers. And Steven will join us as he always does at this time. Last week, if you remember, Steven was coming back and thawing out from being in the subterranean temperatures in Buffalo, New York, going to a game against where his 49ers end up going against the Buffalo Bills up there. That's a bucket list thing. We did a whole show on it. We had a bunch of other things to talk about, but that, of course, was the hot topic. There's a few hot topics today that we want to address and go over as well. But along with us, with Steven and myself, is Logan Landers, our producer and engineer. And welcome, Logan. Thank you for being a part of the show with us today.
Yep, looking forward to it, man. It was a great time last week. Got some travel tips, and it's going to be a great show this week.
Yeah, Steven, his honeydew list is always what it is. But in terms of a man cave bucket list, this is something that I want to do. I think he got the first steps of it.
Oh, there's no question. I mean, the whole trip was a trip for the ages, you know. I mean, talking about really 3 or 4 things that you do in a single trip. I mean, each one, just the vacation alone, if I just did one of those things, which was, say, the Buffalo Bills game in a blizzard, that enough would be enough. But you also had a trip to Niagara Falls. We had a trip to Toronto. We had a trip to Montreal. We had a meeting with a couple of old friends. And, you know, time with my family. So it was very special.
Yeah, multitasking. I guess that's what a man's version of a multitasking is, when you combine several different elements of a trip and you really box as much of it in as you can in order to maximize the trip, right? I mean, you weren't probably planning on most of those things, but when when the opportunity arose, open mind, let's do it. And next thing you know, you got your car keys and you're going to different places.
Yeah, I mean, I had told my daughter I want to go to Montreal. I told her I want to go to Niagara Falls, and I told her I wanted to go to an NFL game. But I didn't necessarily know how we were going to do all 3. And she really was the one who figured it out. And then I just had to look at the schedule and work it in and get the plane tickets arranged and that for the kind of trip. But I'm back in California now. It's sunny. It's baseball weather. Easily could go out and play 2 games right now. The weather we're having. Had some rain last night, but it's a big difference in the temperature. That's for sure.
Well, it's saying it's 50 degrees here in Atlanta right now, but with the wind chill and the way it was earlier today, it's probably more in the lower 40s, upper 30s. Had a little bit of the wind kick in and stuff like that. So you can play golf, and we can talk about you playing golf. That's about the weather change that we've got between the two of us.
We're going to start. I was in Atlanta Monday in the airport, and I noticed outside it was raining. So it didn't look particularly good.
Well, we had a dry fall, and so for me, every drop is a good one. I'll take them.
Well, you need rain. There's no question.
Yeah,
no doubt about it.
Some yesterday.
Well, we're going to start on a Debbie Downer, if you don't mind. The prediction that came, not prediction, but the prescription, if you will, of Randy Moss and cancer that has been diagnosed to him. It's liver cancer. And he, just a few days ago, there was a headline that said Randy Moss to step down from his duties at ESPN due to health reasons. And I guess the person who broke that news didn't want it to come out before Randy did, but we knew. People knew, and it was something that was serious. As a analyst, I like Randy. He doesn't say too much. He doesn't say too little. It's kind of a Goldilocks moment for me with him. I can take what he says, and I want to hear what that man has to say because I value his opinion over what he was able to do. But he's going to step down from that, obviously. But as a player, can we go back into your memory banks? Because what I'd like to do, Steven, for me, the comparison between him being one of the greatest receivers and you having someone right there in your backyard in Jerry Rice, and people were thinking there's no way that anyone will ever surpass Jerry in any of the categories that he was leading the league in and held records in multiple different facets. But Randy, within a very short amount of time, was able to challenge much of what Jerry was able to do. But first and foremost, talk about what Jerry Rice was to you, and then compare that to what we were able to see in number 84 when he was playing for the Vikings and the Raiders.
Yes, Jerry Rice. The way Jerry Rice came into the league would not happen today because of computers and the internet and a more wide scale form of scouting. He was discovered playing for Mississippi Valley State, more or less, when Bill Walsh was coaching the 49ers. They were in Houston playing the Oilers. He was ready to go to bed. He turned on the television to watch a local station give the scores, and one of the local teams being covered on that station was Mississippi Valley State. And he looked and saw a guy named Jerry Rice running all over the field, catching the ball with extraordinary speed and great hands and all the skill you could possibly imagine. How Jerry Rice does not end up at USC or Alabama or Florida State or one of the great powerhouses of that era is amazing. But he came from a very small town, was not well known. And this really goes to, I don't know, high school rankings or recruiting. And I see this to this day that, for instance, Mater Dei is playing De La Salle for the state championship in California this Saturday. And I see the same, and nowadays it's completely different, but I see the same teams all the time. And I think there are players who they don't get discovered because they're in a small town or they're not playing for one of those powerhouse programs. And in high school, especially, you can be overlooked. And so you don't end up with the scholarship. And that seems to be what happened with Jerry Rice. Rice comes to the 49ers. His first year, he's dropping the ball. He's not catching the ball. Joe Montana's throwing it to him. It seems like a marriage made in heaven, but it took him a while to adjust. And finally, around the 88 season, he comes into his own and really hooks up with Montana. They win 2 straight Super Bowls. They win another Super Bowl in 1994. Now it's with Steve Young. So you're absolutely right. He set all kinds of records that seemed like they would never be broken, but records are made to be broken. Before we get into Moss, you're going to see these records broken, especially in football, because the game has changed and offense is different than it used to be, and it's more wide open. It's more passer friendly than it used to be. So you're going to see some of these records broken over the course of time. I think players are they're staying in shape better. They're able to be healthy longer. They're able to recover from injuries like ACL injuries faster. And you just see more games where quarterback is throwing for 400 yards. So that just makes sense that you're going to see these kinds of records broken. Randy Moss comes into the league. Randy Moss, this sounds like a strange comparison, but he reminds me a little bit of Larry Bird, in that Larry Bird started it out at a big school, Indiana University, and then didn't fit in and then transferred to a small school where he certainly did. But, was there a question that a player from Indiana State could make it in the NBA and after playing at a smaller school? And obviously he did. Now, help me out there. Randy Moss's first college was, do you recall?
He went to Notre Dame.
He started off.
He got caught smoking at Notre Dame. They kicked him out right away, and then he ends up finishing at Marshall. He played there with the Thunder and Herd in West Virginia.
Yeah. And Marshall's a really good program. I mean, they were well known for an event that happened way back in 1970, where their plane went down, and it was a very tragic event. But Marshall was always good at their level. So obviously, here's a player of extraordinary ability who could have been an All-American at Notre Dame or any other school, and he's going to put together incredible talent. There was, but because he'd had some issues, there was a question as to how coachable he is, or how will he fit in, and I think he put most of that to rest during the course of his career. He played on some of the best Minnesota Vikings teams that they had since the 1970s, particularly in 1998, I believe. They had a really good team. I believe they went up against your Falcons in the NFC title game in 1998. The Falcons went to the Super Bowl, if my memory serves me.
Sure did. Yep.
Yeah,
that's it.
Yep.
But Moss, I mean, he was tall. He was the prototype. He had big hands. He reminded me, his running style reminded me a little bit of Anthony Davis. He bring his legs up, and he could force the issue when he ran into tacklers, and he could do anything. He could get him on the side. He was one of those guys, and I've always had a problem with the so-called run and catch, which is throw to the sideline and let the guy break the tackle and run. You really do. You need a guy who's big and tall and strong to be able to do that. USC used to have guys like that, and they would run this play, but then after Pete Carroll left, they would continue running the play, and it would just be a 2-yard game because, if you don't break that tackle, it's a nothing play. So it really relies on a guy like Randy Moss who can make that sort of a play, get it off to the sideline, and you can't be tackled, and boom, he's off for 45 yards or more. So he was that kind of player. And I will certainly remember Randy Moss in 2007 when he went over to the New England Patriots, had a chance to really play for a truly great team. I want to say the Patriots were probably the greatest professional football team of all time. Even though they did not win the Super Bowl, they lost the Super Bowl by the barest of margins on an absolutely insane catch by the Giants receiver. Help me out with. Do you remember
David Tyree?
Yeah, remember the one-handed catch. And I mean, but you got to give the Giants credit. But here's the Vikings of that. I mean, the Patriots of that season. Brady was at its peak. They had a good running game. They had Moss. They had Junior Seau. Still at the top of his game playing linebacker. What a team, going undefeated, making it unbeaten through the AFC playoffs, and then they go up against the New York Giant team that I believe had to fight their way from throughout the playoffs playing on the road, but they had Eli Manning, and they came to play, and they upset this incredible Patriots team that would. I know a lot of old Dolphins players. You're talking about Don Shula. There was a lot of old Dolphin players who lifted a glass that day because their record as the only unbeaten team of the Super Bowl era was kept alive. So and then Randy then went into broadcasting, and when you have those kinds of skills and that kind of you've done what he's done, you can just say it in a way nobody else can say it because you've done it, and who can do it, who can't do it. You can evaluate, and that's why there's nothing like a great athlete describing his sport. And that's what he did. And now we're seeing some unfortunate news with him, and my prayers go out to him and to his family. But, I think he had a little bit of a reputation after this event, as you say, at Notre Dame, but he overcame that and was a credit to, the game of football and to the teams he played for and to the broadcasting and sports broadcasting profession.
Yeah, allow me to clarify real quick. He had signed the letter of intent with Notre Dame, and then he decided to go to Florida State. And because the letter of intent had been signed, he ended up having a red shirt and then decided to leave. He was on a previous drug-related charge, and even though he redshirted at Florida State, he ends up getting kicked out of school and then goes to Marshall. And what I like about what I remember from him from those days was he'd be running full speed. He'd just stick his arm out.
Yeah.
And it would probably be just slightly above his shoulder pads while he's running. And that was basically the signal to whoever his quarterback was. Throw it as far as you can throw it. Wow. And I'm going to get it. And thank God he had Chad Pennington, who ended up in the NFL. If he had had a weaker or lesser armed quarterback, he may not have made it as successfully as he did. But everybody that knew anything about Group of Five football knew that this kid was unstoppable. It took him a step or two to get going, but once he was going full speed, he's as fast as Carl Lewis. I mean, he had amazing catch-up speed. And then that little thing where he just sticks his arm up. And even Brady said when they played in 07, he goes, this guy knows more about receiving than anyone I've ever worked with before.
Sure.
And that was very impressive to me because he would read the defenses like a quarterback would. And so he would find spots to get open. And when Tom would let go of the ball, he knew that Randy was going to be there. And what do you have? Tom had 50-plus touchdowns that year, 50. And so it was crazy. Logan, first of all, before we go back, your thoughts as the young buck here. You probably were, on the couch watching games with family and friends back early when Randy was just getting started.
I'll tell you what, Harper, the playground battles that I would have in elementary school, trying to recreate some of the catches that Randy Moss would make on Sunday. I wish you could have seen the elementary school. We were having some fun out there at PE, so it was fun there at recess. But I mean, yeah, Randy Moss is one of the most athletically gifted athletes, I feel like, in football history, just sports also. I mean, like I said, he's a bigger guy, but the way he's able to torque his body, get his hands up there, like you said, the blazing fast, legitimate 4.2 speed that he's able to run. It's like a gazelle. And just an absolute insane athlete. He makes catches that not anyone has made before, and not a whole lot can make after. And like you said, was been on a lot of really solid teams throughout his career, helped out Minnesota in the late 90s, did great work with them. And then had, went to the Raiders for a little while, did some good work, but where he really had his kind of second coming was, as you guys said, in New England, where they were just one game away from going 18-0, going undefeated and winning the whole thing. But just a tremendous athlete. My goodness. I mean, you could sit back and watch his highlights till the sun comes up. That's how insanely talented and gifted that Randy was on the field. And then, as you said, once his playing career is done, he's transitioned into the media. And you'll always know it's Randy Moss speaking because you'll hear that very Southern twang to his voice. That is a very easily identifiable voice with Randy. But I like his commentating style. I think he does a really good point. And like you said earlier, Harper, you trust his opinion because he was there, he was on the field, he's accomplished. So you take his word for it because, like I said, he seems like a stand-up guy. He believes in in the takes he has. So a very credible player on the field, obviously, with all he's done, all the records he shattered, and then off the field doing great work as well, with the various media networks. But, like we said a little bit earlier in the week, I wish that he has a speedy recovery, that, he can get this knocked out here soon and we can get him back on TV and fully healthy so he can enjoy, his life with his family, his loved ones, and get him back at full health.
Yeah, here, obviously, that's a real important part. One of the things that you mentioned that caught me was Randy was a learner along the way too. Stuff that you could do in college, you can't do in the pros in the same way. And he would learn to run and look up for a ball, and most receivers will stick their hands up to go catch it. And then what does the defender immediately do? They put their hand in there to stop him. So he would learn to run and wait for the ball. Instead of catching it where you can see it, it would go past your vision down into, quote unquote, the breadbasket, which is incredibly difficult to do because you can't see the ball. It's going too fast and it's too close to you. And so for him to be able to guesstimate, and I don't like that word, but he's basically guessing where he thinks that the ball is to be, and for him to master that as well as he did is just an amazing piece of athleticism that proves two things. He's an incredible athlete, but he's also a thinker. He's got to outdo in that chess match of how to play. And Steven, you certainly know this. Is the guy going to expect is he going to sit on my fastball? What am I going to throw him next? Well, I'm waiting. I know he's expecting me to wait on the fastball, so I'm anticipating here comes the breaking ball.
Yeah. Randy Moss is one of those rare athletes that I call a savant. I remember thinking this some years ago when I was watching Alex Rodriguez, and I saw a combination of natural ability and a complete understanding of the game. And just to name a few athletes, Barry Bonds, Alex Rodriguez, Willie Mays, Michael Jordan, Tom Brady, Randy Moss, Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, players who have all the tools and the work ethic and an innate understanding. You're talking about catching the ball even though you don't see it. What comes to my mind is Willie Mays making the catch at the Polo Grounds in 1954 on a ball he probably never even saw. He just turned his back and kind of figured at this point in the field the ball is going to land and I'm going to be there. I'm going to put my glove out, and that's what he did. And that's what you're describing with Rice not putting his arms out to sort of distract or confuse the defender, and then boom, the ball is in his breadbasket, as you put it.
Yeah, it's an amazing ability and men's football player, no doubt. And again, we wish him well. We know that this is a tough diagnosis, and don't know, if he'd been feeling some discomfort for weeks or years, but they're going to do everything they can to make sure that Randy, one, survives and lives a long life, and two, hopefully, as Logan, you said just a few moments ago, we hope we get to see him in the booth here real quick. Before we move on,
let me just say this, Harper. One of my best friends, a lady who I volunteer with, a wonderful person, was in 2017 given by her doctor 6 months to live with breast and lung cancer. And yesterday when I got back after my trip, she said, I got some great news. My doctor just called me and told me that I am now officially cancer-free.
Oh, so, how great is that? That's awesome.
It's fantastic. So, and I personally know probably 5-6 people who've beaten cancer over the past 10 to 12 years. So it can be done. It is not what it used to be. It is not the death sentence that it used to be. So people out there who have cancer or know people with cancer, take this take this as some encouragement. Medical science and I've written about this in the past. Cancer treatments in the pharmaceutical industry. So I know a little bit about what I'm talking about. So it's a good news that if you get diagnosed with cancer, it's not like it was in the 1960s, 1970s, or even later.
Yeah, I would imagine, yes, medical, obviously, with doctors and hospitals and research and everything that's a part of that industry. I'll call it an industry because it really is. It's a place that you need to go that you wouldn't normally go, and they are prepared for this. But also, taking care of yourself, eating better, cutting out some things that you may need to cut out, regardless of whether or not you're given a diagnosis like that. And then your mental health is obviously a tremendous part of that. So all encompassing. Thank you for sharing about your friend, and congratulations to her. And we hope that you are able very, very soon to be able to say the very same thing about Randy Moss. Let's move on to some other news, if you don't mind. I'm going to call this NFL and college related because it touches both, and that's Bill Belichick signing what I believe is a 5-year deal with the University of North Carolina. I would not, as a matter of fact, I had a conversation with a person that is in the podcast world for sports announcing, and he asked me a couple of days ago, what do you think about Belichick? Do you think he's going to go to UNC? And I had seen the Pat McAfee interview that he did earlier that day. And this is just a couple of days ago. And I said, there's no way. There's no way he's going to go to UNC because he's only, a very good playoff-bound year with whatever team that he would join from breaking Shula's record. Yeah. Why would he do that? Hello? I mean, that's your statute wherever you go. But how foolish I was to make that decision, because if I actually listened to myself while I was saying this, I just watched the McAfee interview, and McAfee says to him, hey, people are saying that you went to UNC. And as soon as he brought up Adam Schefter, he brought up somebody's name, and Belichick immediately went into head coaching. Oh, we're on to Cincinnati. I'm not going to talk about you, Pat. I'm not going to do that. And that, to me, should have been the trigger that said, absolutely, he's going. He's probably already signed the deal, or it's a done deal. So your thoughts first and foremost.
Well, I guess if I'm going to talk about Belichick, I need to put up the hoodie.
Yeah, that's fitting. That's fitting.
Yeah. Well, I mean, my first reaction is the university.
Can I pull the flag out of my my sock like what he did too?
You can.
We'll allow it. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Sorry for interrupting. Please go right ahead.
If Bill Belichick is going to go to North Carolina, I predict North Carolina will win a national championship in football within 3 years or 4 years. They'll be as good in football as they are in basketball. I mean, that's what I expect out of Bill Belichick. My God, his ability. I mean, it is going to be a little different. He's going to have to recruit, and this is something that he hasn't done. But it's who's not going to want to play for Bill Belichick, And so there's he's in the South where there's already a plethora of talent, and I've made the point that that's really where the best players are, not necessarily the best athletes, but the best football players with the best attitudes who are most coachable.
Let me correct you real quick, Steven, just for a second. I'm just saying there's enough of them that even if there are better players elsewhere, you can find something without going more than 200 miles from your campus. Is that a fair assessment as well?
Yeah, I think you do probably need to go more than in that part of the country, more than 200 miles, especially North Carolina.
If you can touch, if it's 200 miles to Atlanta, that's the number 3 recruited area for Division I in the country, past Dallas. And again, we can get into an argument about it. I'm not trying to. I'm just saying that he can go locally just as well as he might, instead of the plains of Los Angeles and San Francisco or going down to Florida, which I'm sure he's going to do. Yeah. But he's got a great campus too. That's the thing that I think is going to be a difference maker for him. It's already there.
Oh, they have all the tools, as far as being a great sports culture. I think players from all over America are going to want to play. He's going to get guys from California. He's going to get guys from Texas. He's going to get guys from Florida. He's going to get players, especially at this point with Saban gone. He's going to get players that used to go to Alabama, and he's going to get some players who otherwise would have gone to Georgia or Oregon. He's Bill Belichick. He's a legend.
Hey, can I dream with you? Can you imagine working on the same staff again. If Nick doesn't have anything else to do, hey, you want to be my offensive coordinator?
Oh my God, that's an amazing. Would they be willing to do that? Put ego aside. That's
We
like,
might have to dip into some of the basketball money, which they've got more than they can count.
yeah,
But I think that would be the road that would lead both of them back to where they want to be within 5 years. I think Bill wants to be in an NFL city, breaking Schuler's record, and I believe that Nick wants a little more control over NIL. That really was an issue, I think, and he's too young. His wife's going to say, "Get back to work. Come on, you're doing a lot of things right now, but I need you back coaching."
yeah, that seems to be an issue that we've heard about a number of times. The wives going, "Hey, you're sitting around the house too much. I'm too used to you leaving at 5 o'clock in the morning and coming back at 11 o'clock at night, at least during the football season."
Yep.
Now, it's funny. Did you say, Harper, that the Atlanta metro area is now considered the number one recruiting base in college football?
No, not number one. Florida and LA are still number 1 and 2 respectively. Okay. Miami-ish, but I'm saying for cities, not the state.
Yeah.
Atlanta has surpassed Dallas.
I once had a conversation with Lane Kiffin, and I asked him point blank, where are the best high school football players in America? This was around 2010 or 11. I think when Matt Barkley was playing for him. And he said the best players are about a 7-mile radius of downtown Miami near the Overton or Overtown area of Miami, Florida. And he said a lot of these, and he said Miami was able to tap into this in the 80s, but it's difficult because it's a very rough neighborhood, and a lot of these kids get lost they don't make the grades, or they get lost to the gangs or troubles, which is really unfortunate. But he said you could go to a high school game and just watch a game, and with a trained eye like he had, you go, there's 9, 10, 11, 12 Division I football players of size and speed and natural ability out there on the field. So that was what he had to say. As far as Belichick, again, I personally don't think he's going to recruit just in North Carolina. I think they're just going to come from everywhere to play for the guy, at least at the beginning. Unless the college game. Now, he has some background in the college game. His father coached at the Naval Academy, so he grew up in Annapolis, Maryland, watching his dad coach. And I think he coached some in college. I don't have his resume in front of me before he went into the pros. Most of his background is as a professional coach. But we'll see. It's a very interesting development. And what you're talking about is saying maybe Nick Saban joining him. That's got to be a fantasy, but what an interesting one it is.
Yeah, I just threw it out there because I thought about work together.
How about Pete Carroll?
Yeah.
Pete Carroll, his predecessor is the coach of the New England Patriots, and imagine, you talk about two disparate personalities, I mean, that is, and I've always said this, and not to interrupt you, but you have to be yourself. Casey Stengel was Casey Stengel. Pete Carroll was Pete Carroll. Tony La Russa was Tony La Russa. Belichick, Saban. But imagine those two guys working together. I mean, I can't imagine Carroll with his ego, and he has a tremendous ego, and I know I've seen it personally. I've run up against it. Let's just put it that way. Let's say being on his staff. Again, that's an absolute fantasy that won't happen, but it's a very interesting interesting sort of thing to talk about.
Yeah, it is. And Logan, your thoughts initially? Did you think he was going to do this and actually sign on the dotted line at North Carolina? Am I the only one who's thinking, no, he's going to wait? Maybe not with the Cowboys. He's going to wait for a NFL job. What are your perspectives?
No, I didn't expect this. I was very shocked. And I mean, I was surprised just in the last offseason whenever Coach Belichick was going around for interviews. I mean, he interviewed with multiple teams in the league. He interviewed with the Falcons twice. But ultimately, all those teams ended up passing on him. And so obviously Bill was still interested in coaching. We saw he's been doing a little bit of media during the NFL season. But no, I didn't. I was surprised to see he's going to go down to the college ranks. And like y'all have been saying, he gets to start recruiting now, something he's never done before. He would always get these kids from college and train them up to be pros, but now he gets them from high school and gets to train them up into be college athletes, which is a little bit more of maybe a more difficult task because they're probably not as mature as they would be coming out of college to the NFL. So that's something he'll have to figure out and learn. But I mean, obviously, he'll go into a recruiting pitch and just bring his resume, drop it on the coffee table, and walk out. I mean, there isn't going to be a whole lot of persuading I don't think he needs to do whenever he's going up to these kids who are 17, 18 years old, who were around whenever,
Yeah, they've been around. It's not like he's.
No, I mean, this is a well-known coach. They know what all he's done. They grew up with it at this point. So he'll have that, and you guys have mentioned the maybe dream team he might have on the sidelines with him and his assistants. But I mean, he has. We all know. We all talk about the Belichick learning tree and the coaching tree. I mean, there's a lot of those guys that are sitting at home right now that Bill might be calling up as we speak and saying, "Hey, I got a brand new gig. How would you like to come down to Chapel Hill?"
Nice place to be too.
Not at all. Not a bad place at all. And I mean, it's a program who. Right now they're at 6-6. They got one more game coming up into the year. They just a couple of weeks ago said that Mac Brown, their head coach, that he was stepping down. I mean, also too, Mac Brown's 73, Bill Belichick's 72. So they are getting a little bit younger at the head coaching spot, but not by a whole lot.
They went with the younger guy. They went with the younger.
They went with the younger guy.
Yeah.
But I and whenever it was announced that he did sign, I heard people saying, okay, he's just doing this to make the NFL mad, right? To say, I'll take away some ratings. Or he's going to use this to catapult his way back into the league. And just as a way to say, hey, I can still get it done. And he could potentially go back to the NFL later on. I mean, if he does end up staying throughout all 5 years, he'll be 77. So, I mean, he doesn't have a lot of time left in coaching. Right, a lot of coaches don't go until their 80s, but if there's one guy who could, it might be Bill Belichick. I mean, obviously he's a master strategist. We know, the work, the rings speak for themselves. But I mean, I was just talking, Harper, with your son Brian not too long ago about this, and I believe that we could see a Deion Sanders-esque movement in terms of recruits that will be going to Chapel Hill in terms of, like you were mentioning, Steven, with guys who would be normally going to Alabama or Georgia or somewhere like that, they'll go down to the ACC. They'll take some spots away from Clemson and Georgia Tech and SMU, because how could you not with who's on the sideline? That's something that a lot of the coaches in college don't have. A lot of them haven't even coached in the National Football League, let alone won 6 rings. So I think just the pedigree for him is going to attract a lot of talented players that maybe would have never thought of going to North Carolina before he signed on the dotted line. But I'm excited. I think this is going to be fun to watch, and I think we're going to be talking a lot about North Carolina once between now and next season, because it's going to be a whirlwind of talent that's going over there at Chapel Hill.
And a couple points. Yeah, go ahead, Harper.
I was just going to say something real quick. In my dream team, another guy in my dream team, Lawrence Taylor. How do you not Chapel Hill? And I would have Lawrence be my advisor, because things that Bill could do in the NFL, because he had the ability to fire you, to let you go. You can't do that with some of these kids. You can't talk the same way. If you look at Julian Edelman and Gronk, when they talk about Bill, they laugh around, but then they make fun of him and they kind of tease him a little bit about what he says. But you weren't funning around and teasing while you were in the meeting. I'll tell you that right now. So it was pay attention, and he has a very specific style that might be a little too dry for some of these young kids. And you'd need someone like LT to come around and go, Bill, back off, man. And LT's the only one probably in the world that could talk to Bill the way that he would need to do so, if that makes sense.
You could bring in LT, and let's bring in Michael Jordan for a little once in a while.
Well,
I'm sure they've talked about it and played
golf. Sure, he'll come back. But a couple of points. First of all, any great coach is a teacher. So I think he's going to see something like this as an opportunity to come back and teach, which you can really do more in college than in the professional ranks. I see parallel here with Bill Walsh when he left the 49ers and after a short period of time went to Stanford and had a lot of success at Stanford in the early 1990s. And I knew Bill, and I interviewed him, in fact, at Stanford. He loved Stanford. He loved college. He loved that whole experience. He was an intellectual. He was from the area, and he just loved being there. I mean, he liked playing tennis on the campus courts, and he loved just being around professors, and that was his thing. But another quick point, it's interesting that Belichick has apparently not focused on this 12 wins to beat Don Shula, because that's a big deal. And there were several other interesting parallels. Like, for instance, Barry Bonds retired, or did not retire. He was basically let go by the San Francisco Giants within a season. He could have had 3,000 career hits, and that's a big landmark.
Yep.
And Alex Rodriguez retired 6 homers short of 700. So I think it says something about this confidence in himself. I don't need that 12 wins to show that I'm as good a coach as Don Shula. He is as good a coach as Don Shula, if not a better coach. And nothing against Don Shula. He doesn't need those 12 wins. He knows, everyone knows who he is. He knows it. And like I say, it's like John Wooden used to talk about being a teacher. That's what you're doing when you're working with these kids, and these are kids, and he can take 18-year-old kids, and he might find some diamonds in the rough, because remember, here's the guy who's spent a lot of time with rookies who are 22, 23 years old. And Harper, darn well that you don't know when a kid's 18 what he's going to be at 22 or 23, but Belichick does. And so he's seen a lot of guys not like Randy Moss. Obviously, he was great coming out of high school. His circumstance going to a small school was different. But we're seeing a lot of this with the NIL. We're seeing players who go to a small school or they're going Ivy League school. Next thing and because they weren't highly recruited out of high school, next thing you know, they realize, hey, I'm growing, I'm getting bigger, I'm getting stronger. I'm going to transfer portal to a top Division I school. Next thing you know, they're real pro prospects. So he's going to see that kind of development. He can look at an 18 or 19-year-old kid and say, hey, I can foresee where you are in 3 years. You're going to develop. You're going to be a really good player, and I want to be the guy who teaches you how to be the best player you can be.
Well, that's one thing that I got out of the initial presser that he did is I'm going to teach kids to be pros. They're going to be coming out of high school. They're going to come to our place, and before you know it, we're going to train them on what it means to be a professional and how to get there. That, I believe, is part of his strategy. Now, how does that generate the wins and losses, right? Are you an ACC champion? Because really that's what everybody's going to want, especially the fans and the season ticket holders and the major contributors to the school, right? They're going to say, I don't care if you put 10 guys in the pros, you only won 4 games this season, right? So there's going to be a trade-off, I think, absolutely. But I think for me, priority number one, he's got to get a quarterback. He doesn't have one, and then he's going to build his offensive line, and from there, it's in his staff. But the preparedness that he has by leaps and bounds, others will start talking about it, and you'll probably hear a Belichick effect of how other coaches we're doing that too. We're preparing folks for Ohio State and Penn State and Michigan and Southern Cal to be in the pros, but you're not going to hear it in the same way that Bill says it, and his ability to be able to not one articulate it, but put it into practice. That's what I think is going to be a difference maker for him.
And one last thing, remember the ACC teams are all going to make at least one trip to California to play either Cal or Stanford every year. So that's, if you're a player from the state of California or the West, that's a chance to go back to and be seen by your parents and your friends once a year. So that is there now. It's an opportunity for that conference to really move into the next level. You get a Miami playing really well. You get maybe a North Carolina, and some of those teams start to advance and encroach upon the level of the Southeastern Conference.
Yeah, if Dabo goes west of the Mississippi or has never done so, he will now, obviously, because I think that there's an open door from a recruiting perspective. Absolutely. Hey, before we move on, any final thoughts that you had regarding Bill? Logan, was there anything else you wanted to add?
I'm just excited. I think this is unexpected, and like I said, the ACC, they said, all right, I think we're getting a little bit tired of playing little brother here. Let's beef it up here, add Bill Belichick, and get a lot more eyeballs on them next year. It's gonna be fun.
Not sure what Boston College, not sure what Wake Forest or Duke think about this, but I would imagine that North Carolina State, Miami, and Clemson are all going, uh-oh. It's going to be a little harder than what we thought. So
yeah, it's going to cut in Clemson and Miami. I don't think there's any question about that.
Yep. All of a sudden, there's another person at the table that wants to sit down and have the same Chateaubriand and Cordon Bleu that you're having as the higher ends of the conference. But we'll see. Hey, before we move on to other things, I want to bring up the playoff. There's been a lot of different perspectives that people have. Some like it, some don't. Steven, this is the first time since we found out who those 12 teams are. Give me your opinion of what you think in terms of, did they get it right? Was there a massive mistake that's just glaring them right there in the middle of the fadeaway? Tell me, give me your thoughts here and perspective, and especially if you can, kind of get into maybe some of the press that you've heard there on the West Coast and how they feel about it.
Well, I think Miami probably is not very happy.
Agreed.
And I just have to ask, because I've been on some text threads with some of my friends who are really into this. How does Miami and SMU do with each other on a neutral field? I think not Miami, Alabama and SMU on a neutral field. That was my first question. I mean, Alabama is the elephant in the room, or they're more than that. The elephant, of course, that's I don't know how that became their so-called mascot. Roll Tide elephants. Yes. Anyway, that's a question for another day. But okay, we were talking, I don't know, I was watching some of our earlier episodes about 3-loss seasons, and I can remember years where, let's say, USC in their prime had 3 losses, but, they could play with anybody on any given Saturday. And I believe Alabama, even though they've lost Saban, could play with anybody on any given Saturday. I don't know what happened against OU. It killed them. It killed their season. That can happen. But I guess their quarterback, Milroe, is that his name? Milrose?
Milroe. Yep.
He's been a little bit. He's got a lot of talent. There's no question, but he's been. He hasn't been as consistent as you would like to see, but that's a team that I still think can beat anybody on any given Saturday. So, but the thing about it is, they've been there for so long, and so there's a natural sort of inclination, a little bit of jealousy out there. It's like, let's move on from Alabama. It's been Alabama, and they're in, you know how Alabama is. They're in your face. I've got a T-shirt that I got when I was back there, and it basically says, "We're greater than you, and you know it, and I know it." And it says something like that on the shirt. That's their attitude, and a lot of people are tired of that attitude. But it was a well-deserved attitude to have. That's how good they were. So that's my number one take on what we're seeing here.
Yeah, I mean,
you bring up. I'm with you. Go ahead.
No, I'm just going to piggyback and say, I mean, if Alabama and SMU faced off against each other, hypothetically, then I think Alabama will get the win in that one. Like you said, though, Steven, that's it felt odd leaving Alabama out, just because, I mean, whenever you think of playoffs, when everything's success, I mean, in the last 15 plus years, that's been the team in college football. And so it's every time I look at this bracket, it's weird. I don't see that crimson and white A anywhere on the sheet. So it's a weird sight for sure. Go ahead, Harper.
Don't lose 3 games. If you lose 2, there's no debate. But that third loss, I think, is really the Mississippi loss. Was the one that, in my opinion, made everybody put their hands up, going, "We can't help you." Everyone, Notre Dame especially, they get a Northern Illinois. You get a gift. You can lose 1. We know how competitive it is, but please don't lose the third.
Yeah.
The Vanderbilt game, you lose to Tennessee in a close one, and you're out. Yeah. And how many times has Nick had to fight to get him back in, especially when there were only 4? So, I'm not saying I don't like Alabama. And South Carolina can have a place at that table as well. Hey, what about us, guys? We beat all these teams too, but you lost to 3. And give me a break. There's no way that Boise or SMU on a 2-week preparation bowl game type of deal. I agree with the friends that you were telling me about. On a neutral field, SMU and Bama. But this year, I don't know. It's not the best Bama team that we've ever seen. So
No.
I said this a couple days ago, so Logan, please forgive me, you're hearing it for the second time, is when Manti Te'o was at Notre Dame and everyone was saying, this is a great Notre Dame team and just watch what they do. And they played Alabama in the final. It was a rout. And Notre Dame just got soundly defeated. They got run over. You could have left at halftime, and you would have missed most of the scoring because Bama wasn't done. It was just a rout. And I don't want to see a rout. I don't want to see, let's say, Boise and who are they going to play? Penn State in week 2. And Penn State just annihilates them. I'd like to see that they pick the right teams in the first place to where they're going to be competitive. Yes, they might get a little lopsided, but at least the matchups themselves are as good as you can possibly put together.
It's that Manti Te'o game. I'm friends with Scott Hunter, who was a great quarterback at Alabama, late 60s, early 70s. And right around the time that BCS title game was played, he sent me a text, and it had 2 photos on it. One was this sort of catfish guy who Manti Te'o got involved in, if you go back to those strange events. And the other was the girlfriend of Alabama's quarterback, who I think was named Miss America that year. And he said, that's really all you need to know about this game. And it just basically turned out.
AJ McCarron and his girlfriend went to Auburn, and Brent Musburger just drooling all over on
Yeah. Brent Musburger was going crazy, but yeah, I remember that. I think I still have that photo somewhere.
Their girlfriend versus our girlfriend. I imagine probably had.
Yeah, and Hunter goes, this is really all you need to know.
Yeah, that's all you need. Yep.
Well, funny enough, because the game was so lopsided, that's even funnier because Notre Dame forgot to get off the bus and play that day. It just amazes me how that differentiation. And I think Bama fans everywhere are going to go, well, what do we got to do to get in? And I've thrown this out there again, Logan, forgive me, but what did Florida State have to do last year? Going 12-0. What do we have to do?
Yeah.
How can we win this thing? We beat everybody. Nobody else in this tournament could say that they beat everybody, and you're not going to include us. It's just, I think there are going to be people always that are going to say we're on the outside looking in, so the whole system is wrong. Or others will go, we did the best we can with what we got. We know there's going to be controversy every year. We're going to try to get around it as best as we can.
Yeah, Auburn was unbeaten, untied under Tommy Tuberville in 2004, and I think they finished third or second in the nation when it was all said and done. Didn't get to the title game.
Yep. Logan, your thoughts?
Yeah, it's I mean, look, there's going to be debates forever about how can you get in? Did we do enough? We won all these games. If you're Florida State from last year, undefeated, won your championship, still couldn't make it in the top four. But the thing that kind of I couldn't understand the reasoning behind is the athletic director for Alabama said whenever it found out that they were not going to make the playoffs that we'll have to look at our non-conference games and see what we can do there. To me, that wasn't the problem. Like you said, Harper, the problem was that you lost to two teams that you should have mopped the floor with.
Yeah.
And, I mean, they had some good wins, obviously, but I think the losses were just too much. Like you said, if you got 3 losses, it was already a dark horse to win, to get in. I mean, if they would have won in the SEC championship, if they would have, they beat Georgia earlier in the year, but if they would have kept winning against the games they should have been against, like I said, Vanderbilt and maybe the upset of the season, then you could see why. But I didn't like that reasoning of, we'll look at our non-conference games and see what we can do differently. I didn't like that.
Well, I mean, they played Texas back to back prior to Texas entering the SEC, and in fact had their hands full with the Longhorns. I really was impressed with how Georgia rallied against Georgia Tech because they were being outplayed. And, when you're a team, a coach, Harper, this, and everything's on the line and you're getting schooled, and it's not just the fact that you're losing the game. It's like you're losing your season, and it's all fallen apart. And to rally from that and come back from that when the chips are down, I think said a lot about Georgia. So I have to give them credit. But then beating Texas, I mean, they were getting killed by Texas. It was the strangest game. It reminded me of the Texas USC Rose Bowl game in 2006, only the other way around, where you're running up the yards, you're running up the time of possession, but you're not running up the score. And I mean, I think one of the announcers was saying early in the game, I think it was Saban, as an analyst, was saying Texas is winning this game. Texas is dominating this game, except everywhere except where it counts the most, which is on the scoreboard. And I said to my daughter and my son-in-law, we were watching the game in Vermont, I said, boy, this is how you lose a game, because you let it slip away early, and the next thing you know, the other team realizes, hey, we still have a shot here. Texas had Ewers, who was making some really good passes early in the game, but Georgia really was able to plug some of those gaps. They were doing something right in terms of figuring out how to get their pass protection shored up on these long passes, which early in the game Ewers was completing, and they kept it to a minimum, and that was a really good coaching job by Kirby Smart and his staff.
Yeah, and again, to get back to Alabama's argument, there are some games that you're winning, you're dominating in every way, shape, or form except the score. They were 4-0. They're beating Georgia, but that Georgia game was a one-score going late. It was 34-4 was the final, right? So it's a one-score game there at the very end. Even though even though Alabama went crazy in the first half and just totally dominated that game. They lose by 5 to Vanderbilt because Alabama. The following week, they win a 2-pointer against South Carolina, so that's a field goal game. And then they lose to Tennessee 24-17, so that's a one-score game. And then they turned it back on again, but they had a 3 or 4 week period there where it was tough for them to do it. And I know the momentum over the last month and a half, we've beaten everybody, but with the Oklahoma loss, bye-bye. Sorry, bye-bye.
Well, you're right. You can't have 3 losses. I mean, you can make the argument that I'm making that, hey, they could beat Boise and they could beat SMU and they'd probably beat Notre Dame. Getting back, the game that interests me is, and I think the state of Indiana must be going crazy, is Notre Dame versus IU. And what a year for the Indiana Hoosiers. I mean, I think I read somewhere, I don't know if this is true or not, that in Division I football, Indiana has the worst all-time record in the history of Division I football. I mean, this is not a strong football. It's a great basketball school, obviously. But other than in 1967, they won the Big Ten championship and lost to OJ in the Rose Bowl 14-3. I can't remember any year where they competed, where they challenged for any sort of dominance, Big Ten dominance. And they went to maybe a few bowl games here and there. I couldn't even tell which ones. And then all of a sudden they have a season like this. So now they're up against Notre Dame, and they're playing at Notre Dame, right? Am I correct on that?
Yep, correct.
So it's God, this is a new aspect of this playoff bracket, which is very different, is that you have games played in weather on home surfaces. They're not all being played at bowl games, in Phoenix, Arizona, or under a dome, or in Indianapolis or wherever, in these sort of plastic kind of contained environments. You've got to deal with Notre Dame in mid-December or Indiana in mid-December. I mean, you're on the south end of Lake Michigan down there. It's cold.
Yeah.
So they're both used to it, or they should be. But this is going to be an interesting game. I don't know whether either one of those teams will advance very far, but someone's going to come out of that game with a victory.
Yeah, Penn State and Ohio State. The advantage, I think, and I've said this a lot of times before, Stephen, if the Rose Bowl itself would have a alternate to where you go back to the Midwest. One year you have it in California, West Coast teams are going to dominate. Then one team, then another year you got to go back up there and play at the Horseshoe or in the Big House. Even if it's another team, the California teams and the West Coast would get absolutely slaughtered. They're just not built for that. Everybody would have their shivering fits before they would play. They're not used to it.
Well, I make a couple notes on what you just said. One is USC used to play Notre Dame at the end of the season, and then when Jess Hill came in at USC in the early 50s, they said no more. We'll keep playing you, but we're playing you in October under a blue-gray October sky. We're not coming back there in late November. Sorry. Our fans don't want to do it, and our team doesn't want to do it, and that's all there is to it. Now, the Rose Bowl, a little bit of trivia, kind of weather related, is that in 1921, the University of California and Stanford University built brand new stadiums. These were two of the newest stadiums ever built in college football or in football at all. The only real sort of stadiums that existed prior to that were, I think, Harvard had a stadium, and there was the Yale Bowl. And there really wasn't much in the way of stadiums. In fact, even in baseball, they were more known as parks. And Yankee Stadium had not been built. The Los Angeles Memorial Coliseum had not been built. So Stanford and Cal build these new stadiums. And there is this thing down in Pasadena, California, called the Rose Bowl. And it's really kind of a tournament, and there's chariot races and various things. And it's a way to take a look at the Caltech campus where they're playing, on whatever surface they created. And Stanford says, hey, let's play this Rose Bowl game at Stanford. A lot of people don't know this. And it was a real challenge because it seemed like, well, God, they have a beautiful stadium. It holds 80,000 people. It's still in California. Let's play there. It does rain more in Northern California than it does in Southern California. I can tell you many New Year's days in the Bay Area where it's raining and you look at the Rose Bowl game and it's played in gorgeous sunshine. I mean, Jim Murray used to write that Pasadena literally was controlled by God. I think it's had one rain game in the history of the Rose Bowl, which was, I think, Ohio State USC in 1956, won by Woody Hayes 27. But anyway, make a long story short, the city of Pasadena got together and for $550,000 over 6 months built the Rose Bowl in time for the 1922 season, and in 1923 the first Rose Bowl game was played. So, and that's essentially the same structure that they have now. They really, you go to the Rose Bowl, there's not all that much there. Obviously, they've probably done some retrofitting, but imagine that for that amount of money and that amount of time building a stadium that is held up. And you see so many stadiums that have not held up. You look at, say, the Cotton Bowl, long ago determined to be a dump. But everyone who shows up at the Rose Bowl loves it. The location is what really makes the Rose Bowl. It's the fact that it's settled into the San Gabriel Mountains, and there's often snow on those mountains. And it's a setting like very few others in college football. So I just wanted to make that point.
Yeah, I've never played a game there, but I've been on numerous occasions, gone to the game, and I had a high school baseball game. It's called Brookwood Park. That's right there where the golf course is. Yeah. I
played. Jackie Robinson played there when high school.
Yeah, very unique. Yeah, very unique, and it's interesting. You talk about the construction of it. One of the things that everybody talks about is the big house. I think it's the same design, maybe not the exact same person, but that design where it's going to be low and it's going to go out. And so if you're at the 50-yard line, you could be fairly close, but you can also be, you feel like you're 200 yards away from the action, depending on where you sit.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. And I've been there many times and sat high, and you're right. You don't feel like you're the Coliseum, for instance, you're up in the clouds, but the Rose Bowl, it really seems like you're really on the field. It's an incredible design.
Yeah, and the other thing, unique, but I'm thinking the same. I was going to say the same architect that built in Stanford may have done that, and then also everyone else gets to see what's going on, and hey, we're going to build something that's similar to that, like what Michigan did. So Michigan coming to the Rose Bowl, it's almost like you're playing in the same type of stadium. The big difference is you probably got a few thousand fewer people at the Rose Bowl than what you have at Michigan, because I think their capacity is 106,000 now. The Rose Bowl was about 102.
Yeah, it was. It's been reduced like the Coliseum has over years from well over 100,000 to into the 80s or even less at the Coliseum. But this stadium, the building of these stadiums created an incredible boom in the 20s. You saw the Coliseum, Yankee Stadium, the Big House, the Horseshoe, Florida's Swamp, eventually Notre Dame Stadium, and then eventually the Cotton Bowl, the Orange Bowl. And this, it represented what I call the new Rome, which was the United States in the 1920s, establishing themselves as really a world power after World War I in a new kind of society and a new kind of economy in which people could have leisure time and have entertainment, and you had radio came into play and all these things, and it really established a new way of living in a very prosperous country, and nothing represented that more than these beautiful new stadiums that were built.
Yeah, there was enough people in enough parts of towns that could make that happen. And also, too, college was king, and you'd get 100,000 people or 80,000, depending on the size of your stadium. And then just a few blocks away, the following day on Sunday, there's an NFL game, this National Football League that just started, and you'd only have 2,000 or 3,000 people for that. There was a real discrepancy about where the money was, even though it was 50 cents for a ticket. The college dominated, at least from the football perspective, for decades, up until probably the 60s is when it really started to change.
Yeah, well, the real change was when Red Grange left the University of Illinois to play for the Chicago Bears, and they'd draw huge crowds at Soldier Field in Chicago. So that was a big moment. But yeah, you're absolutely right. Pro football had its real major coming out party in 1958 when the Baltimore Colts and Johnny Unitas played Frank Gifford and the New York Giants in what was considered the greatest football game ever played at the Polo Grounds in New York City for the NFL championship. And game went in overtime, sudden death, which I don't think anyone had ever done that before. Nobody had ever heard the term sudden death. What a dramatic concept to bring to football. And this comes around, and this is the first year that Vince Lombardi is coaching the Green Bay Packers. And so he returns Green Bay to its dominance, because they had been a great team in the 20s and 30s, and then they'd fallen by the wayside. It was a great point that was made in a documentary about Vince Lombardi. He had been a defensive coach for the New York Giants. He and Tom Landry built the New York Giants defense in the 50s. And Lombardi finally gets his opportunity to be the head coach at Green Bay, which was a real way station in professional football. And his daughter goes, "Green Bay? Where's Green Bay?" And they break out a map, and they could not find Green Bay on the map. It's a couple hours north of Chicago on Lake Michigan, but they could not find it on the map that they had. I don't know how old that map was, 1958 or so. But he said, "Well, when I'm finished, they're going to know where Green Bay is." I'm trying to do my best, Vince Lombardi. Yeah. What the heck's going on out there? Grab. But yeah, they certainly knew where Green Bay was after Lombardi was finished with him.
Yeah, he certainly made sure that Eau Claire and Fond du Lac and Madison were all second to even Appleton is second to Green Bay after he was done. Hey, before we go away, but Logan, any last thoughts here on the bracket? We talked a little bit about the Battle of Indiana that's going to take place. Penn State, SMU, of course. Those are the first week game. We got University of Texas in Austin they're going to host a game. There'll be 104,000 people for that one. Probably 12 Clemson fans, and then about 102,000 in Columbus for the Ohio State game. What sticks out for you?
Yeah, for me, I'm really interested in that Clemson-Texas matchup because Texas, as we know, they lost the SEC championship game to Georgia. A lot of people thought they would win in their rematch from earlier in the season, but Texas finished the year 11 wins and 2 losses, both to Georgia. So I know that for the moment they're glad they don't have to face them, but that could come to fruition at the finals. But as for Clemson, I mean, well, maybe the most red-hot team in the country, right? A team that had that ugly loss to Georgia early in the year, and then everyone was getting on Dabo Swinney. But, hey, he kept riding it. He believed in his guys, and they believed in him, and they went all the way. Won the ACC championship game. It also didn't help Alabama's chances just tying that back because they were ranked number 18, I believe, going into that game. They upset SMU to win that title. So I'm looking forward to that one. I think Tennessee and Ohio State would be a good matchup, but I want to give hats off to Arizona State. I mean, they're the top 4 team in the country right now. When preseason, a lot of outlets said they were going to be dead last in their conference. Well, they won the whole thing. So exceptional job from that team, and they did well enough to earn a bye. So I like the diverse field. We have a lot of different teams, a lot of different styles of play. So I'm excited to see how this college football playoff 12-team bracket's going to go in its first inaugural year.
Well, let me ask you, how do you feel about the conference champions getting a bye in the first week? You're speaking about Arizona State. I mean, I kind of like the idea that you're really giving deference to winning a conference, which really is new.
Yeah.
Means something to win your conference. Obviously means a lot to win your conference now if you're one of these top conferences. So what's your attitude on that?
I'm okay with it. I'm good with it. I think that what they probably do is once, because, I mean, you see, obviously Clemson won the ACC, right? But they didn't receive a bye week. They didn't get one of the top 4. So they probably go in there and look at, okay, you won these games, but by how much? Or what was your strength of schedule? Or a bunch of other factors that go into play. But I am in favor of the fact that if you do win your conference, you are in, for the most part. I think that's a solid strategy, and it makes it maybe just a little bit easier for the committee.
Right.
What I've done in my understanding of the NCAA is that they're like the lawyer joke. When are they lying to you? Every time they open their mouth. I still have the remembrance, Stephen, of when this first thing started. We're 4 teams, and you had Baylor and TCU both undefeated, and the NCAA punishes both of them by saying, well, you're undefeated, but you didn't have a conference championship, so we're going to let 2 teams from the SEC get in. I just don't understand it. You tell me that you're going to have a conference champion in, but you put Boise. Boise doesn't deserve to be there if that rule is in effect. Now, is their record strong enough to put them in there? Sure. But don't tell me that you're going to put the conference champion in and give a bye to a team and then not do that. That's my ongoing problem with what the NCAA tells me versus what I'm looking at on the screen right now, and that's where the schedule is. But you've changed your mind after you've already set the rule.
Yeah, well, don't get me started with the NCAA. Who likes the NCAA?
I won't.
Who likes the NCAA?
I won't, because they.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they're slowly being, I don't know, I want to say the word phased out, but I like the NIL, I like the transfer portal, I like the fact that college kids can stay in school longer. I think in basketball, for instance, this whole one and done thing, I think really made basketball kind of a joke at the college level for a long time. I mean, I go back, I'm an old timer going back to looking at Pete Maravich and Bill Walton and Lou Alcindor playing 4 years and establishing a fan base, of watching these magnificent players over a long period of time. And I look at a college, they say so-and-so from Duke or North Carolina was named College Player of the Year. And I'm going, who is that? Some guy was playing in high school, DeMatha Academy, Maryland last year, and now he's a College Player of the Year. It can't. They're not ready. They're not ready for the pros. You need a few years to prepare yourself, and so if you can make, and a lot of them come from disadvantaged backgrounds. If you can make some money for yourself and your family, and you don't have to cheat or do something that puts your school in a bad light. That's the worst thing, is when you've accepted something from some alumni, and next thing you know, your undefeated team is on probation, and that's just destroys everything you've worked for. So I don't, in that respect, the NCAA, I guess they've done some good things, and they, organized collegiate sports, but they've sure made a lot of enemies.
I agree. I think they have, and they've made some mistakes that they'll never own up to. I think that the Marshall plane, and we talked about that very briefly a little bit earlier when we were talking about Randy Moss, that opened the door for freshmen to be able to play. Well, why couldn't freshmen play? Because someone made a rule that said so. If that had been argued in the Supreme Court, the NCAA would have lost. If I can't leave a school without having a year of my eligibility taken away, if that went to the Supreme Court, it would be absolutely thrown out. You should be able to do that. Normal students can. Why can't the student athlete? My roommate, who's a political sci major, gets to work and make some money. How come I can't? Because I'm on scholarship. That would be overturned. So there's so many different areas that the good old boy club, and I'm just calling it that because I don't know what else to call it, the NCAA establishes some rules that made no sense at all to the general public, and they didn't apply to the general public. It only applied to the athletic aspect of the students. And so I thought that was a pretty strange thing. But we'll give that, that some other day. We'll have a whole show about, who hates the NCAA more. You and I will argue that back and forth, okay? But in the meanwhile, give me your last words here. We got to talk about the health of Randy Moss and his significance on our lives, Bill Belichick and what he's doing right now, and we've also touched the bracket. Logan, give us your final thoughts here today.
Yeah, just final thoughts. Like I said, Randy Moss, great athlete. Hope he can, get better as soon as possible and beat cancer and be just, back living a healthy life. Bill Belichick, I still can't believe it after talking about it for a while now. It still feels unreal, but I am pumped to see how he's going to do in Chapel Hill. And college football, we got a little bit of time. We got some of the bowl games, not these games as we just talked about, but bowl games this week. Always fun to watch. And top 12, it's going to be fun here come the end of the season.
Yeah, you were talking about this period of time before freshmen could play varsity, although that was – they were able to do that until the early 50s or mid 50s. And I think there was some sort of a basketball cheating scandal, gambling scandal in New York that caused them to not let freshmen play. I'm not really sure, but I'm something of a fan or historian of junior college sports, which very few people really follow. And that was really the 60s and 70s when the freshmen were not eligible, were really sort of the great boon of JC football. Two players who stick out, O.J. Simpson and another one who I know personally, Ron Yeri. I think Ron Yeri played at Cerritos Junior College for a year before he came to USC. And, you wouldn't see that today, a player of that quality going to a junior college for a year. OJ, 2 years he played at City College. And I remember just some of the great teams. City College became a real powerhouse. I remember Fullerton Junior College being a really good team in the 60s and 70s. Pasadena Junior College. Harvey, I'm sure you know Harper. I'm sure you know Harvey Hyde. Does that name ring a bell with you? Pasadena
It
Junior
does.
College. Yeah, he was a friend of
How
mine.
about Saddleback? Throw Saddleback in
Yes.
there. They had some great
Yes.
football teams, right?
They were a real powerhouse, and I think there were some good teams in Central California, and there were other good teams. Like I think there was a school in Kansas that was really strong. So anyway, I've always enjoyed junior college sports. I think it's an underrated place to see talent. A lot of good baseball players come out of JC. So some of the new things we're seeing with the NIL might dilute the JC ranks a little bit, which I think would be a little sad but one thing somebody have said, but if you go to junior college, you got to really be a grinder, because you're not there for the glory or the girls or anything like that. You're there to play and to grind through, probably playing in front of relatively small crowds and getting not much fanfare, but you're doing it because you love it.
Yeah. Or just, hey, I'm a late bloomer. I wasn't highly recruited a year or two earlier. When I was 17 years old. I'm more of a man now, and I can do it in ways that I couldn't have done if you looked at me back then. But well, that's another. Gosh, the whole JC thing. We can do that a whole show on that. But until then, and when we get that figured out, we'll write a book. Right? Steven knows how we can get the book written. We'll get that figured out. So in the meanwhile, thank you for tuning in, everybody. We've gone a little bit around just the main topics that we were going to discuss today. We did want to pay homage to Randy Moss. We did want to let everybody know our opinion on Bill Belichick and the signing there at the University of North Carolina, and just get an early overview about the playoff. Next week, obviously, and then right there up until game day, it'll be more in the forefront. But for right now, just get a viewpoint of what's going on. And yes, we even discussed a little bit about the junior colleges and their place in our history as well. So for Logan Landers, our producer and engineer, for Steven Travers, our guest here on Take 5 with Steven Travers, I'm Harper LeBel saying thanks for tuning in to another episode of 100 Yards of Football. Have a fantastic day, everybody.